Hello, and welcome to Viva La Action, the bi-weekly action movie podcast, where we'll be talking everything action, from the best, worst, and most underrated of action movies. My name is Santi, and before we get into the main episode, I just wanted to preface this by saying this is our very first episode. So at the beginning, you're going to hear a little bit of us working out the kinks, a little bit of us figuring out the format of the show, a little bit of working it out, but this very first episode was recorded about the Indian Telugu-language action film RRR, directed by S.S. Rajamouli. We do talk about it in depth throughout the episode, but just to preface, if you haven't seen the movie, I encourage you to go watch it because we do spoil most of the film and the major twists. Again, this is kind of our first episode, so we're still kind of working out the kinks, but I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. We do say our names at the beginning, but just so it's clear, my name is Santiago Romero. I am a film critic, filmmaker, occasional film commentator, and my co-host is Grayson. They are my dear friend and a very astute film watcher, a very enthusiastic movie fan. So I hope you enjoy this episode. We'll be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks' time. So this podcast will only be put out every other week. We're going to try and do 2 episodes a month. And then in between those, we're going to have some smaller bonus episodes where we will talk about something unrelated to the bigger topic and in which we will announce the movie for next week in case there's any viewers who want to keep up with us. So anyway, thank you so much for listening, and let's get on with the episode. Restart your mama. I don't know. Okay, so here we are.
Yep.
We're talking about a movie.
Yeah.
This is so awkward with another person. I've never done a podcast with another person before.
We just gotta ease into it.
We do have to ease into it. So, I guess we could start with like introductions.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
So.
Oh, do we do swearing?
Yeah, we'll do swearing. I'm gonna put it on explicit, so no
Excellent.
children will be listening.
Cool. Get crazy with it.
So I guess to start, my name is Santi. I guess you could call me a film critic sometimes.
I would say so.
Occasional film critic, occasional filmmaker, film-loving person. That's me.
Right on.
And you are?
My name is Grayson. I am not a film critic, buff, whatever. I'm a theater aficionado. Majored in it, which was, great idea on my part. Theater. When I watch movies, I watch them for fun. I wouldn't say I'm a critic by any means.
Okay.
So yeah, I just watch it for fun.
Well, but I mean that's probably the way you're supposed to watch movies.
The way I go into it is just like, I'm here to have a good time.
Well, so that's kind of, I guess, like the dynamic we're gonna go for is like I'll be the one who's got like all the like nerdy knowledge about stuff, and then you'll be the one who like comes at it as like a regular person.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, oh my god, this thing is a mess. The movie we watched this week, it's a 2022 Indian film. It's I believe it's pronounced Telugu-language, so it's like one of the major languages in India.
Okay.
It was directed by S.S. Rajamouli. I should have looked up how to pronounce these names.
Yeah, you're doing your best.
But it's RRR, or RRR, which stands for, and I looked this up, and then I forgot to write it down.
Yeah, it was also at the very beginning of the movie, and I forgot.
Yes. This movie has a lot of stuff in it.
There's so much.
It stands for... Oh, it doesn't say it.
Oh, no.
Oh. We're working through the kinks. That's what matters.
Yeah.
Is there a dog under that? Oh, there was.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't. Okay. It doesn't matter. It's Triple R. That's what
Triple R.
That's what the name of the movie is.
Yeah.
Now I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
I watched it for the first time early this year. I was on a road trip and I like downloaded a bunch of movies on Netflix, and this was one of like 5 or 6 that I watched. But I'd heard about it because like people were saying, oh, it's like the biggest like it's the highest budget Indian film at the moment, like of all time. Which is funny because, like, when you look at it, like, American movies have budgets that are, like, $300 million or something.
Yeah.
And this one has a budget, I think it's, like, $60 million.
Oh, damn.
Yeah,
Really?
so, yeah, it's... Which you wouldn't think, because, like, when you watch it, it, like, looks really good.
Yeah, like, the effects were
They're really good.
crazy.
Like, and, anyway, we'll talk about it. But, so, like, I'd heard about it, but I didn't really know anything about it. And I'm not, like, I mean, I like movies, and I like movies from around the world, but I don't watch like a ton of Indian movies. I just, you hear about them, but it's not like I go out of my way. So I was like, I was watching it and just like laughing, not because I'm like laughing at like the movie, because I think it is like a really good movie, but like laughing at just like how fun and like, it's so like sincere, but like at the same time, it's so like brutal.
Oh yeah.
Like the violence is so like, not that there's a lot of gore or anything, but there's these like crazy action sequences where like people get like murdered really like.
Oh yeah, especially towards the end. I mean, some of that stuff I was like towards the end, I was cackling.
I know. Yeah.
I was like, this is. I was like trying to like find like a movie that I could like compare it to.
Yeah.
And I really don't think, at least for me, I couldn't like think of anything to compare it to. Just because it's so.
There's not really. I mean, I think like in America, like a lot of our like action movies, especially, are like very self-serious. So I think it's like unusual for like an American viewer to see a movie like this and like comprehend like how just like big and like crazy and sincere, and like there's just so many moments that are just like pure joy where like, and I'm sure we'll get to like the music and stuff, but like I think I'm so like not used to like having like just a song break unless I know I'm gonna be in like a musical. So like there's this one moment, and it's like 20 or 30 minutes into the movie where like we've met like the two main characters, and they've like started to become friends, and they go to this party that's like, filled with all these British people, and like there's this very like melodramatic moment where one of them gets like knocked over and he's like, all like disheveled, and the other one like jumps on a drum set and starts playing this like plate, and then they just burst in a song, and it's like I just remember watching it like
yeah.
And if you don't know that's coming, like
it's jarring.
It's so jarring, but like in the best possible way.
Yeah, it was very like High School Musical almost. Like in terms, because like when you look at like take like Les Mis or like Rent, right? There's like a build up to the song,
right?
And I've seen like bits and pieces of High School Musical, but like the bits and pieces that I've seen, there's not really like lead up to it. They just go. Like there's the like I Don't Dance song or whatever, the baseball scene. And there's like, the two characters are like talking, and then all of a sudden it's just music. Right. And so it's very High School Musical-esque. Yeah. Where it's just like they jump into it.
Yeah. But I mean, well, I think we're ahead of ourselves, but like, yeah. So what was your first experience like? Because I got to say too, like so the kind of the format of the show is generally going to be like, I'll have seen the thing that we're going to talk about, and then like I'll introduce you to it as in a way of like, because I don't know, I'm going to do a better intro when we actually like record it. But the general format is like, we're talking about action movies. We're talking about, from all over the world. We're going to talk about like low budget ones or big budget ones, like, foreign language films, like just kind of anything in that realm. But we're sticking specifically to action movies because that's like my bread and butter. That's what I, love. So I've seen this movie before. This is my I watched it for the second time this week. But anyway, what was your first experience?
Oh man. When it started out, I was like, okay, this is cool. I can get into this. And then as it started like getting into like some of the action and the music and the story, I was laughing more and more because I was like, this is incredible. Like I was like, by the end of it, it was almost like this is gonna be weird, but I like transcended.
Yes.
Almost. I was like, what did I just witness?
I know.
And I came away from it just like happy.
Yeah.
And it was like I feel like throughout the entire course, because it's long enough that you can experience every emotion throughout the length of the film.
Yeah.
Right? And by the end of it, I was like, yeah, I had experienced every human emotion there was.
Yeah.
And it was so good. And it didn't, even though it was like 3 hours, it didn't feel like 3 hours. I was like, after it ended, I was like, oh, that's it?
Yeah.
And so, it was awesome. I had to sit a little bit with my thoughts afterwards.
Well, I mean, I think what you say there is like perfect for why I like, because it's one of those things where like once in a while, like a movie from outside of America will like break through, and you're always kind of like wondering like, why is it like this particular film that like, breaks through the American boundary? And I think with this one, I think part of it is what you said, where like it just goes through like everything. It's like it doesn't take a moment to breathe, where like, and I think that's a good thing. Like I don't think that's a flaw. It's like okay, well, I think we should go through like the synopsis sort of and like go through the plot. And I'm gonna mostly do it from memory just because I think it's more fun that way. But like for me, like the moment that I was like 100% in this movie was like 5 minutes in, because it opens with like there's this like group of like British. Because it's set, if you haven't seen it, and you should see it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's set during the British Raj, which was kind of when England had control of India for the most part. It was being colonized. So we open on like this. It's in this jungle setting. There's this tribe, and there's a little girl singing to these like British aristocrats, I guess you'd call them. She's like the wife of like a British general or something, and it kind of opens with like she's like, oh, I love like this girl singing or whatever, and she like buys the little girl, and there's like initially like some confusion where like the family's like, oh, they're paying you for her singing, like it's a whatever, but they're actually buying the child, and they essentially kidnap her, and as they're like pulling her into the vehicle, the mom is like chasing after her. And she like stops the thing, and there's this moment where the general comes out of his car. Well, first of all, a soldier comes out and is like going to shoot her in the head, and I thought that's where it was going. And so I was like, oh god, this movie's kind of grim. But then like the general he's played by this actor named Ray Winston, who you've probably seen him before. He's in Thor. He's like. His name in Thor is Thandril, I think. He's like he's got a big beard and he has like an axe. He's one of the Warriors 3.
Which Thor movie?
He's in the first 3. He gets killed in the third one.
Oh, in Ragnarok?
Yeah. It's when she first arrives and she kills like 2 people right away. He's one of those 2 people.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
and then he was the Punisher at one point.
Oh.
He was in Punisher Warzone. He's in a bunch of stuff.
Right.
But anyway, he comes out of his car and he's like, what are you doing? Like, you can't like shoot this woman. And you think for a second like, oh, he's like, sympathetic or whatever. But he's like, he gives this speech that comes up a few times in the movie where he's like, from the moment this bullet is manufactured to the moment it reaches your gun, like it costs one British pound, £1 sterling or whatever. So he's like, this, Indian woman is not even worth £1 or whatever. So the soldier, like, and it's not funny, like it's brutal, but the soldier goes and grabs like a stick and like hits this woman over the head with it. Yeah. But like the way it's shot is so dramatic and like it's like in slow motion and you see like the bits of like wood fly all over the place. Yeah. And I just remember watching it and like bursting out laughing, not because it's like funny, but because it's just like the way it just explodes. It's like
the execution.
Yeah, and that's the moment where I was like, I'm in. I'm into this movie 100%. And it's just like everything about it is just so wonderful. Yeah. But kind of going on from that, like we go on to like meet the two main characters. And I don't know if you know, did you do any reading about the movie or anything?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Anytime I go into a new movie, I don't do any reading. I might look at Rotten Tomatoes to see like what the critics and the audience are saying. Right. I never trust the critics. I always trust the audience because they're human beings.
That's fair.
And they tend to have, well, in my opinion, better opinions. Except for you. You're the only critic I actually listen to. But yeah, I don't do any research in a movie ever. Okay. I go in clean slate, just no thoughts, just absorb everything.
Okay.
So.
Well, then you might be surprised to find. So the two main characters, so their names are Raju and Beam. Yep. They're real people. So I mean, obviously they don't have like super strength or whatever, but so they're both of them are like pretty famous like historical revolutionary figures in Indian history. Oh, nice. I did some very like surface level research. So Beam, who is he's the one with the beard. Yes. Yeah. He's the bigger guy. Yeah. He was a revolutionary leader in the state of India from, I think they say he's like from the Gond tribes. Okay. And he basically led what culminated in like a communist revolution in part of India. Good for him. Where he like, and both these guys, I should say, like, they both died really young. So like, and they both died pretty violently. But
as it is with revolution.
So Beam, he like led this like crazy revolution of like this like, all these like tribal people who live in kind of the outskirts of this part of India against these like wealthy landlords. Mm-hmm. And he like, they helped set up these like socialist communes that like, traded. And he's like lived this crazy life. And then the other guy, his name was Raju. He also had like a crazy revolutionary history where kind of some of it, because you see like some of his backstory where like his father is like this, he's like a British, he's like an Indian version of like Che Guevara, where he has like, he's leading this like armed revolution. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened in real life, where like Raju like led this like band of like armed guerrilla fighters against the British. And he like raided like police stations and like did all this crazy stuff. And he ended up dying because he was trapped by the British. And then he was tied to a tree and executed by firing squad.
Oh, God.
I know, which is like...
Oh, my God.
like, I'm kind of glad we didn't see that in the movie, but like...
Yeah.
So I think when you know that like they're based on real people, it kind of makes it more fun where like they're like these historical figures, but they're played almost like superheroes.
Yes.
And what I thought is so fun is like, you're introduced to them in these insane ways where like, so the first one you're introduced to is Raju, and he is shown first as like a British soldier. So he's like I don't know what the word is, like a conscript almost, where he's like working for the British, and they're in this weird outpost that is in like the middle of the desert for some reason. Yeah. But they're surrounded by barbed wire, and there's like, I swear to God, like 1 million people like trying to break in. Yeah. And someone throws like a firebomb or something.
It's a rock, I think.
It's a rock, and it hits like a British general or something.
He threw the rock and it hits a picture of a British general and it breaks and like falls to the ground. Yes.
And so he's like, the captain or whatever is like, I need someone to go get me that man.
Yeah.
And he like jumps over like the barbed wire, and he's like swinging his club, and he fights like 100 men.
Yeah.
And that's his introduction in the movie. And the other one is introduced by fighting a tiger.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like barehanded.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where you're like, oh, okay, so these aren't real people.
That fight with the tiger, where he was like holding on to the ropes, trying to like contain it and like hook it together.
Yeah.
All I could think about was that scene in Winter Soldier where Captain America was like holding onto the helicopter the railing and just like pulling it in.
Yes.
I was like, okay, all right, so he's one of those guys.
Right. It's like this excuse to like show his biceps or whatever. But like, I just like, I think what I love about it, like part of it is like, it's this idea that like they're these like larger than life characters, but they never like are like, oh, they're superhuman. Right.
Yeah. It's they just still bleed.
Right. They still, well, that, but it's also like, there's no explanation for why they can like leap barbed wire fences, or they can like pull stuff out of the ground and hit each other with it,
or like throw a motorcycle
like they don't explain it, and I kind of love that, because it's almost like they like let the audience know, like, or it's almost this like trusting the audience enough to know that like you don't need an explanation for everything. Like, we understand this isn't the real world. Like, they show us that pretty much immediately, where it's this like hyper real, crazy. But it's not like I feel like in a lesser movie, like especially in an American movie, they'd be like, oh, he's empowered by this thing or whatever. They're just like, these guys can just do this stuff. Like,
right. Well, and I don't know if this was ever talked about like in your film classes, but it's something that was discussed a lot in theater classes. And it's this idea that like from the get-go, like at the start of a play or a musical or whatever, you have to set the rules.
Right.
And then the audience suspends their disbelief going, okay, this is the rules of this world. We are observing this world and these are the rules.
Right.
And so when all that happened, my, theater whatever kicked in and I was like, okay, they can just do that.
Yeah.
Right. It was great and it was hysterical, but there was never a moment where I was like, why can they do this?
Right.
Because just from the start, the movie went, here's the rules, here's how these people operate, suspend your disbelief,
right,
and go with it.
Exactly, yeah. And it's like, I don't think there was ever a moment where I was like, like that couldn't happen. Like,
right.
I think just the way the movie starts and then like the way it carries through, there's never a moment where you're like, oh, that's unrealistic or whatever. Because it's like the whole thing is like silly.
Yeah.
But and I don't mean that like derogatively. I mean, it's like, it takes itself seriously, but not in like a I don't know how to describe it. Like,
I know what you're saying. It's the best way I can describe it is that like they're just having fun.
Yeah.
It's not like, because like with most American movies, like you were saying, in superhero movies, they're like, oh yeah, we got to give the backstory and here's why they have superhuman powers, and then it's like they take themselves very seriously and it's like all drama and action. With this movie, they were somewhat self-aware and they were like, these people have superhuman powers, but we're gonna have fun with it,
right?
And like we're gonna enjoy ourselves and we're just gonna make what we want to make, right? Which I love.
Yeah, and I think what's like fascinating is that it's like it's so sincere, which I think is like, it's something that I'm not used to anymore in movies, because like especially blockbuster like Hollywood stuff, it all feels very like cynical and like it's made to just make money, which is like, yeah, of course it is, like that's what movies are there for. But I love the idea that like it's just this. I think part of it is like I kind of wish American movies had the sentiment of like taking like historical figures and making them like superheroes. Like I love the idea that like, I don't know, I dig the whole vibe of it. And like,
well, wasn't there a movie where Abraham Lincoln like
Is a vampire hunter?
Is a vampire?
Yes, I was going to say that's the closest comparison that I could think of is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I kind of want to like talk about at some point, but
well, I've never seen that.
That'd be perfect then.
Yeah, I remember when it came out, and I was like, that seems like a very silly movie.
We might do that next week then.
Excellent.
But,
all right, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's anyway. So I don't even know how to. So okay, so the girl gets kidnapped, and then we cut to that scene of Raju fighting like 100 people, and the kind of the like impetus for the plot is that this tribe is like, we got to get this girl back, and there's this great speech that this like cultural ambassador gives where he's like, you don't understand, like this tribe, like they all stick together, and if you like take one of them, like they all suffer. And he's like, well, whatever, you know, who cares or whatever. But he's like, no, you don't understand. Like when someone goes missing, they send someone out to like recover them.
Yeah.
And then they show the scene of him like fighting a tiger.
Yeah.
And so you're like, you understand, oh shit, like everyone's in trouble.
Yeah.
And so then the further, like as the plot goes along, Raju is kind of like given the task of arresting this, like, you know, they call him a shepherd because he's like, you know, trying to get back this girl. So on the one hand, you've got like Beam, who is trying to recover this person from his tribe, and then you have Raju, who's trying to like arrest him. But they just kind of coincidentally become friends.
Yeah.
And so it's like this game of them like not discovering each other while also like trying to achieve their individual goals, which I thought was like fun. And to me, it never felt at any point where it was like contrived that they don't know that each other are like their enemy. Like I like that thought that there's like that tension there, but there's still like, you never felt like one of them was just like trying to use the other one. It was like they just became friends kind of coincidentally.
Yeah.
And the way they become friends is this crazy like river sequence where this train explodes seemingly for no reason.
Yeah.
And it like traps this kid in a river, and Raju is on the bridge and Beam is like underneath it, and they like somehow wave to each other, and they're like, we're gonna pull off this like crazy ass stunt. They like never say what they're gonna do, but they're like, they like look at each other, and he's like, he just does some hand motions.
Yeah. Well, and Beam was wearing like all white.
Yes.
And I found this very interesting because Beam was standing on the coast of the river.
Yeah.
And there was an elevated part of the river.
Right.
That was just a bit higher than the surrounding bank. And because they saw the train explode, and then Beam gets up on that, like, I think it was like a rock or something.
Yeah.
He gets up on that rock. He's all in white, and that's how Raju notices him. And I just thought that was very interesting. It was almost like, because Raju clearly, like, he saw the kid there, and he's like, okay, how do I get this kid? And then all of a sudden there's just like this, just like a beacon, right? He's like, that guy.
Yeah.
That guy.
I didn't even notice that. But like, yeah. And it's such a funny, like, I mean, it's not funny. It's a great sequence because it's like,
awesome.
it like, it's this like lesson in like escalation where they're like, they start off like one of them's on a horse and one's on a bike, and they like cross each other, and they have like a rope
tied to each other. Yeah.
Tied to each other, and they like jump off the bridge. And then one of them has a flag that he like dips in water.
Yep.
So the other one grabs the kid, and then they like switch. So they like throw the kid, and the other one throws the flag. He wraps himself in it so he doesn't get burned, which I thought was like a cool detail.
It was. Really
I wouldn't have
cool.
thought it. Like, I do like. There's like a lot of little moments where they like. It's clear that like someone thought about it. You know, like there's, like I was saying, like on the one hand they do this thing where they're like, we're not going to explain like why they're superhuman. But on the other hand, they do a really good job of like explaining little things that I think like a lesser screenwriter wouldn't have like picked up on. And one of those is that idea that like he wraps himself in like the wet flag so that he doesn't get burned. But anyway, so then it's basically just an excuse for them to be able to fly that flag, which like I don't hate because it's like a great, it's it's a very pretty movie anyway, but like they take the time to make these like great like poster shots where he's like flying the flag. I did find it kind of funny. I thought he was going to throw the kid in the water, but he just throws it like on the bank.
Yeah.
And then you just see the kid like in slow motion like tumble across the thing, which I mean, obviously he's not hurt, but I thought it was funny that he's not like here in the water. He's just like fucking
get on land.
Get on land. But yeah, so that's kind of like the moment where they first meet. And then there's like a song that shows like their friendship. And it's this song that comes up a few times in the movie. And did you watch the dub or did you watch the subtitled?
I watched it in the original Hindi, and then I had English subtitles.
Okay, and I should say for people who know more about this stuff than probably we do, the original dub is in Telugu. I think that's how it's pronounced. That's like what it was originally shot in. Then it was dubbed into Hindi because I think Hindi is like the bigger language spoken in India. So the one we watched was the Hindi dub that's on Netflix. You can find the original dub on some other website I can't remember the name of. But yeah, so we watched the version that's on Netflix. I think they're the same length. The only difference is the language thing, obviously. But if you watch the Hindi dub and you have the subtitles on, it subtitles like the song lyrics. Yeah. And what I thought was fun, and like it's something that we don't see in like American movies really, but what I thought was kind of funny is it's like this song that's playing. It plays a bunch of times throughout the movies, but it's like explaining like the
yes, I did notice that.
Like the plot, and it's like, oh, this is an unexpected development. What's gonna happen? And it's like, I just kind of love that. Like it's this like extra thing where you're like reinforcing the idea that like people who are watching it, like it's just like really hitting you over the head with like what's happening, which I mean, it kind of fits into the larger thing of the movie. But even if you didn't know that, like, it's still just, like, it's a nice song. Like, all the music is great. Like, it's
wonderful.
The soundtrack is great. Like, the musical, like, numbers are great. Like, there's, like, little moments where they have, like, more contemporary music, like, almost like hip-hop or, like...
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole...
Like almost like Bollywood. Almost.
Yeah. Ah, it's so good. But anyway, so, yeah. So they, like, have this song that, like, explains their friendship, which I love. And then... I don't even know what... So then, like... I'm trying to... It's such a long movie.
I know. So, yeah, after that river scene, the Beam... I think they're, like, going around town or something. And right. Beam had, like, noticed that British woman... I totally forgot her name.
I think her name...
Oh, Jenny.
Jenny, that's
Jenny.
Right, yeah.
And there's this... And, like, Raju notices Beam, like, sort of, like... fawning over Jenny, and so Raju's like, talk to her, you know?
Yeah.
And Beam is like, I can't talk to her, right? I can't do that. And so then there's this great sequence where Raju's like, we're gonna talk to her. Follow my lead, right? He goes into it was like a mechanic shop or something, and he just like grabs a handful of nails.
Yeah.
They hop on a bike, because Jenny's like going out to the market or something, and she's in her car.
Yeah.
And so they drive ahead of her, and then Raju drops the nails. She runs over him, pops her tire, and like stops. And she stops right where Raju and Beam stopped, because Raju was like, "Oh, stop here," and Beam was like, "Why?"
Yeah,
and he's like, "You'll see." Or he was like, because this is where she's going to stop, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, sure enough, that's where she stopped. And then, they kind of talk, and there's obviously this like language barrier.
Right.
And, they kind of understand each other.
Yeah.
But it's still difficult. And so Beam then goes with Jenny to the market.
Yes.
And they just sort of root around the market. And then, because Jenny was buying a dress for Molly.
Yes,
who was right. Beam's sister.
Yeah, well, like, I think it's like spiritual sister. Like, not like actual, but like, yes. And there is a funny moment where, like, they do kind of play with, like, the language barrier thing. And I think sometimes there's moments where it's, like, a little bit much. But the moment that I found really funny is she's telling him, like, don't call me, miss, like just call me Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
But he thinks that whole sentence is her name. So he's like, oh, that's a long name. Don't call me Miss, call me Jenny. Like, and it's kind of funny. Like, and there's a moment where Raju's like, you fucking idiot. Like, she's just,
Yeah.
But one of the things I guess I liked about like their dynamic, that is like the two leads, like, I like that Beam is very like straightforward. Like, he's very, sincere and like, he's not like as jaded by everything. And he's very like,
genuine.
I think he's very genuine, and I think something that like you don't get a lot in a lot of different like cultures, movies, is this like idea of men being like very affectionate with each other. Mm-hmm. And it's something that comes up a few times, but like there's a great moment like early in the movie that you normally only see with like female leads, where he's like helping him get ready for this party. Mm-hmm. And it's like a nice moment where it's like, oh, they're just like being affectionate, but not in like a like romantic way or anything like that. It's just like a nice like thing that you don't see a lot. Like a lot of times it's in like rom-coms and stuff where the girls are like helping each other get ready or whatever.
Yeah.
But I like that, and it's a tiny moment. It's fleeting, but I like that idea that he's like, oh, we gotta get you ready for this party, and he's like giving him like new clothes and stuff. Yeah. And the party scene itself is like so good, and so they go. We talked about it already a little bit, but like they go, and Raju's like, I gotta go do something over here, and he's like, he leaves Beam with Jenny, and they start like dancing in this like snooty kind of British way, and there's like his name's Edward, and he's like an awful like,
and he's the worst.
He's the worst. He has this horrible rat mustache, and he's like,
he looks like he has a punchable face.
Yes. Whoever that actor is, he did a great job. Yeah. Like, I didn't look him up because I didn't recognize him, but I didn't look up what else he's been in. But he's so good. Like, he's just like, sniveling, and he's like entitled and like kind of racist. And he's like, there's this great moment where he like trips Beam, and he's like, look, he doesn't even know how to dance. And then he does this like little ditty, and he's like, that's how you tango or whatever. And then there's like this like, so Beam like knocks over this like tray, and you see it kind of rolling like in slow motion, and it keeps cutting back to it. And there's a moment where Raju like kicks it, and it like flips onto this like drum set, and he starts playing it. And then he jumps off the drum set, and they're like, you got to do the whatever this dance is called. And they're like, he's like, what's that? And they just burst into song. Yeah. And it's like, I think in like a lesser movie, you would have been like, what the fuck? Yeah. But in this movie, I was like, yes,
let's go. And then it evolved into a like dance off.
Yeah.
Right. Against like all the British people, and then Raju and Beam.
Yeah.
And even the women were kind of like involved in it. And it was so good because you're watching, and this was I think really cool because you watch these two, Indians,
right,
who grew up learning these dances, right? They're going, right? This is nothing from them. This is another like Tuesday evening, right? All the British people, their legs are cramping up. They're getting Charlie horses. They're falling over, right? And I just thought that was a really good like moment because just like allowing like that cultural dance to be like, this isn't an easy thing,
right?
And you have to practice. You can't just like pick it up like the tango or the mambo or like whatever, right? And I thought that was really great.
Yeah, and I think what's funny like is I feel like, and it's something I think I'm going to talk about a lot during the run of this podcast, is like there seems to be this like divide between like people who like musicals and people who like action movies. But for me, I feel like if you really love like action movies, you should also like musicals because it's the same, you're getting the same pleasure. Like you're watching like choreography, you're watching like, dancing is like action, right? It's like a body moving through motion. And I feel like this movie blends those two things really well because it's like, yeah, those two guys could have gotten into like a fist fight or whatever, but it's like by having it be a dance sequence, I feel like it's just like it's the same feeling, but it's like it's so much more fun. Yeah. Like they're having this dance off, and you get like the same satisfaction from seeing that guy hit the dirt, like, you know, exhausted or whatever, and he can't do the dance, as you would them like getting into a fist fight. Mm-hmm. But because they're like singing and it's this like big bombastic like crazy number, it just hits so much better. Like mm-hmm. It fits that like the tone that the movie's going for, and it's like it's this nice moment of levity where you're like, again, it acknowledges like, oh, this isn't the real world, like this is this crazy surreal thing I'm living in. But like I've gone back and like listened to that song like on Spotify. Like it's so good, and it's just like that was, again, it was the moment where I was like, this is like my favorite movie of the year. Like it's just, and I guess if you watch a lot of Indian movies, you might be kind of used to that, but I don't know. I feel like this movie does it so well. Like it's like they pick the perfect moments to like introduce songs, and there's not that many of them. I think there's only like 2 or 3, but the ones they have are so well timed that you're just like, you don't even notice. Like, I mean, you do notice, but in not like in a negative way, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. To the point about like, if you like action movies, you'll like musicals. Mm-hmm. I fully agree with that. Like take like Rent, right? There's a song called Tango Maureen where you have his name's not Roger. I totally forgot his name. But you have one of the main characters, and you have 2 main characters who one of them she's like a lawyer, and she's in a relationship with the other guy's ex-girlfriend, Maureen, and there's this great sequence where she calls him because she's trying to set up the sound equipment, because Maureen's gonna do like a sit-in like thing, because they're all getting kicked out of this like tent city or whatever, and she calls him over, and they start singing, doing this tango, right? It's a tango song, but she's leading, right? And so it's this like flipping of the roles, and it's this like back and forth where they're dancing together and talking about Maureen and their relationships with Maureen. Yeah. And it's not like action, but there is clear conflict, and it has that same satisfaction that we had in that dance sequence in this RRR, because at the end of it, it's just like they understand each other because they've both been in the same situation.
Right.
And so absolutely, if you like action movies, watch musicals, man. They're awesome.
And I think, like I said, like I think you get the same kind of satisfaction. Like I don't know. It's just, it works so well, especially like in this movie. Like it's something that I think I wish like more movies would do, where you blend genres. Like this movie isn't a musical, right? Like it's not about the music, but I would say it's also not, I mean, it is an action movie, but it's like there's so many different like aspects of it. Like it's a really good drama film, and it's a really good musical, and it's a really good action movie, but it doesn't like sacrifice any of those things for the other parts of it, if that makes sense. Like there's no point where you're like, oh, this action's great, but the drama kind of sucks or whatever. You know, it's like it all works, I think. But and there's I don't even know how to describe it. Like there's just such a good, like, you want to like live in this movie. Like it's like such a nice work. And even though there's brutal violence, like there's no moment where you feel like, I don't know, like sad about the world, or like you know, and it's inspiring in a way that I think you don't get a lot anymore, where there's just these moments of like, I don't know, we'll talk about it. But so anyway, so there's the dance. It's wonderful. So it's just fantastic.
Well, and the end of that dance, Raj and Beam are the last 2 standing.
Yes.
And they're going, and all the women are rooting for Raju. but Jenny is the only one rooting for Beam.
Yes.
And Raju notices this. And this is a testament to their friendship that we were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
Raju, quote unquote, goes down.
Yeah.
And to help Beam look better for Jenny, right? Which I thought was very nice.
It's a nice moment. And I think one of the like better things this movie does is like by the time they both figure out like who each other are, you buy the friendship enough that like it is really tragic when they have like a falling out. And their falling out is insane. Like,
it's crazy.
Like, so I love that, like, and we're skipping around a little bit, but like, Beam figures out that Molly is in this governor's palace, right? And there's this big thing going on, like a big party, because the governor has just been knighted, and so they're like, we're gonna throw this big thing, and Beam's plan is like, he figures out that there's 2 gates, so he's like, okay, I'm gonna wait for the first gate to open, and then I'm gonna crash a truck through the gate. And the truck is going to be filled with wild animals.
That took me by surprise.
Yeah.
I had no idea what his plan. I thought he was going to like throw the tarp off and there's going to be people, right? Revolutionaries. Yeah. Take over.
No. It's like tigers and there's like deer and I mean
bears.
Bears. They kind of set it up because like when you see him fight the tiger, like they don't kill it. They like put it to sleep. And he says something like, I'm using you for my own benefits or something like that. And you're kind of like, oh, is he going to eat the tiger? But they don't show any of that. You're just like, oh, that was weird. But it comes back, right? Yeah. Like you see the tiger and it's like, anyway, like, and it's this moment of like, it builds up to this climax where like the truck flips and in slow motion, he like jumps out and he's got these 2 flaming torches and there's all these animals like jumping out with him. But I just love that that's his plan, is like to like cause all this chaos and then somehow like save her in the meantime. But so he's like storming this palace, and then at the same time like Raju figures, like, because he gets bitten by a snake at some point. Yes. Like he's interrogating this guy, and the guy's like plan is to like grab a snake and like throw it at him. And Beam like saves his life, but then Raju is like, conflicted. And he eventually decides, like, I got to do my job. I got to go arrest this guy. Yeah. And so he shows up at the governor's palace, and Raju has this, like, insane theme that, like, when he shows up, it's this, like, crazy, like, music. He's like Darth Vader. Like, he's like, walking through the and, I should say, he comes onto the scene on a flaming chariot.
Yes. Like, yeah. It's just a horse-drawn carriage with, like, 4 horses, and it's on fire.
It's on fire. And they don't explain why it's on fire. But he like, you just hear him go Beam, and then he like comes through and he jumps off, like, and they just have like a punch up that for a while, like Beam is like, he's on the defense, right? Where he's like, he can't believe that that's his friend. Like, and I remember the first time I watched it, I was like so sad because I was like, oh, they're like friends and they're like,
and they don't fight,
and they're fighting and you don't want them to fight. But then like by the time that Beam has like, he's like, all right, I gotta fuck this guy up. Like, it's this amazing like fight sequence where they're like throwing fire at each other, and one of them has like a fire hose and one has like a torch, and they're like hitting each other. It's just like, and they're like leaping up buildings, and like one of them picks up like this chain.
It was Beam.
Yeah, he picks up like a chain with like a concrete block at the end, and he's like swinging it around, and it's like, it's just so good. Like it's
awesome.
It makes like every other like enemies to friends movie just look like nothing. It's just so
well. And there was a theme that sort of started surfacing. It was I think it was kind of established towards the beginning, but Beam was water. And Raju was fire. Right. And in any like fight sequence, those 2 elements, when the 2 were fighting, were used, right? So in this fight, Beam picks up that water hose and it's water, and then Raju has the flames, right?
Yeah.
And then think about the bridge scene.
Yeah.
That Beam and Raju sort of have their opposite elements, but then by the end of it, they've swapped and are
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really cool, and then that plays out through the end. Or through the rest of the movie, this just like idea that one's fire and one's water.
Yeah, and I think that works out well. And it also kind of helps like visually, where you like get a good sense of like who is who at any given point because of like what they're doing. But it's so good. Like so the fight between them kind of culminates in like Beam getting arrested. And then we get like this flashback, which is like in an American movie, a flashback is like 10 minutes long. This is like half an hour.
Yeah. It was awesome, but it was like necessary.
It is necessary, and I think it helps like understand, like you get a better understanding of like why Raju is doing what he's doing, because it shows that he comes from this like revolutionary background, and his father was this like freedom fighter, and there's this like, I mean, the whole flashback basically culminates in the realization that like Raju has been like building himself up so that he can transport weapons to his tribe and give them like arms to be able to fight back against the British. So he's like this like inside man. But the like fight sequence where his like village gets stormed by the British, and he's like, it's like his dad has this like crazy like character design where he's got this like turban, but then he also has like a bunch of like ear like rings, and he's like, I don't know who that actor is, but he's like so cool.
Oh, he's
like
the coolest dude ever.
Like the first time I saw him, I was like, who is this guy?
Yep.
But his dad is like a crack shot. Like he's able to like hit people from far away. And you learn that Raju is also like like good at shooting a rifle. And so there's this sequence where they both collectively fight off like 100 British people. But what I thought was cool about that sequence is like, it like really didn't pull any punches in terms of like how brutal it makes the British look. Like there's a moment where you see a kid get shot.
Yeah.
And it's like, in an American movie, they would like cut away and like whatever. And it's not that, he doesn't get shot in the head. He like gets shot in the chest. But they really still like show you him getting like shot in like
and
slow
there's, like,
motion.
An exit wound.
Yeah. And it's like and the mom is like, ah!
And then the mom gets shot.
Yeah. It's insane. But it's like, and there's like, it's like really sad because he has to like, there's this really cool, like the way it plays in the movie is like so badass and like epic, where you see his brother get shot and you see his mom get shot, and you're like, he's like, oh my god, like my mom and my brother, and his dad is just like, load, aim, shoot. Like he doesn't even like, and you see him like breaking, but it's this like, it again is like this theme that like these guys know that like
there's a cost.
There's a cost to this fight, and there's like they can't stop no matter what. Like they're the underdogs, and it was such a cool, like, it's such a cool moment.
Yeah. Well, and it's too that like it's that idea that like sort of plays out in like Les Mis, right? Where and if you haven't seen Les Mis, please do. It's awesome.
It's a good movie.
It's so good. If you like Hugh Jackman. But the revolutionaries, right, they build their barricade and they lose because the French people are still afraid of the British government, and they're like, we're not going to win, there's no hope.
Right. And
the final like fight between the French revolutionaries and the French government, it ends with two of the revolutionaries, and they're on the top floor of, I think it's like a inn or something, and they're standing side by side, and one of them raises their battle flag. It's just a pure red flag. And the very end of the song, the very last song of the movie, talks about how there's, and this is a theme throughout the whole movie, but it's this idea of like, there is hope for tomorrow, even though we may have lost, we may have inspired somebody else for the future. And I think that's what the dad was thinking, because he was like, okay, there's a cost to this and people are going to die, but hopefully this has inspired somebody to later down the road take up arms and actually defeat.
Yeah, and I think it's a cool idea that like we don't get a lot anymore, where he's like fighting for he's not willing, because I think a lot of times now, like especially in American movies, like we're so cynical that like a lot of times like we don't have heroes anymore. We have like anti-heroes where they're like, we'll sacrifice anything for whatever. But what I like is that like the dad, like his priority is getting everyone away and like getting people to safety. And so you see him like making an effort to like, he's like willing to sacrifice himself. And like you do end up seeing him get shot because like Raju has to shoot the general through his dad, the dad has like grenades on him, and he like shoots the dynamite and blows his dad up.
It was so cool because he raises his hand and he comes out, and the British are like, aiming their guns at him, and then he says load, and then it cuts to Raju loading. It was the last bullet. Yeah. It's the final bullet. And he loads it, and then it cuts back to the dad and he says aim. Yep. And then you see Raju aim.
And then he throws his cloak off, and he's like covered in dynamite.
Yeah, oh yeah. And then he just says shoot, and fires it. And they did this a couple times with the rifles and guns in this movie, but they showed like the interior of the rifle as the bullet gets fired, and there's like a little glow on the back of the bullet, and you see it like exit the barrel in slow motion.
It's kind of like that game Sniper Elite, like it's like that view, like the you follow the bullet as it like whatever. I mean, it doesn't like enter his brain or anything, but like you see his dad like blow up. And it's like it's not like gory or anything, but he's like paced, like he's just gone. And I don't know, it's such a great that whole flashback. Like, so what I also did like in prepping for this episode was like I watched some of the director's other movies, and so I gotta say, like, the director, he's known for like this kind of movie where he makes these like really long like epics, and two or three of his movies are in the like highest grossing Indian films of all time. So it's like this one. And then it's this other movie I watched called Bahubali, which I'll talk about because it has a similar thing where, like, midway through the movie, there's, like, this really, really long flashback. And in that movie, it's, like, the last third of the movie. And then it, like, cuts back, and then the sequel kind of continues the framing story. But that movie is, like, it's insane on a similar level, and I feel like we should talk about it at some point because it's just crazy. But it does a similar thing where like you see this character and you're following him, and then we kind of cut back to his backstory. But that movie has like it's like set in medieval India, and the flashback is this like Battle of Helm's Deep fight where they're like there's these two brothers who are like competing for like a kingdom, and one has like a sword and one has like this like stick with like a rock at the end that's like attached to a chain, and he's like swinging it around, and there's like this moment where like one of them like, anyway, we'll talk about it if we talk about that movie. But I think what I like about this director, like, and he has this quote where somebody said something like, oh, this movie is not very historically accurate, like it's, does these things. And he said something to the effect of, well, it's not real, like it's all just imagination. And I think what is really cool about like his style is that it does feel really like imaginative and creative, and like there's no moment where you're like, oh, that's paint by numbers, or like, oh, I saw that coming. Like, everything he does is like in the purpose of like entertaining and like just making things look cool, which like I think in the lesser hands of someone, like if the movie wasn't compelling, you wouldn't care. But like because the story's already really good, there's these moments that like you should be like, oh, that's stupid, but it just comes across so cool.
Yeah.
And I think the moment, like I said, where the dad just blows up is like it should be like, who cares? But it's so much like it's so cool because he just like he builds to it like kind of organically. And even if the movie is like crazy big, it's like you buy those moments. Like you're so bought into the movie by that point that you're not like, who cares? Like you're just like, oh my god, that guy blew up.
Well, and it's because you're so invested in the story and these characters, the dad blowing up and Raju's mom and brother dying is so quintessential to what he's doing now.
Yeah.
Because his dad was like, he was like, promise me that you'll get, a gun for every, whatever. And Raju was like, yeah, I promise. And that's why he went off to join the British, military and police force, is so that, and you touched on this earlier, so that he could get those weapons for his tribe.
Right.
Because it was a promise to his father, and we know why he made that promise.
Yeah. And so I think too, like that flashback kind of functions so that not only do you like understand his motivation, but I feel like at that point you kind of don't like him anymore because you're like, how could you be like on the side of your oppressor or whatever? But it kind of reels you back into liking him again. So then when he does inevitably get captured, because he tries to free Beam, like there's this scene where it's the second song where Beam is getting like beaten in the like town square. Yeah, he's getting flogged. there's a great moment where he's like getting whipped or whatever, and he's like, whatever, I don't care. And the British wife, who like, again, she's great, like she's so like conniving and evil, like she's like, here, try this, and she just has this whip that has like barbs in it, and I'm like, where'd you get that? It was but yeah, so, and he's using this whip on him that's like ripping his like skin off, and he's like bleeding, but there's like this great song about like him being like a child of the forest, and like he can survive anything and whatever. And it kind of culminates again in like all these people like rushing the stage, and it's like this metaphor for like him inspiring revolution and stuff.
It was the "Do you hear the people sing?"
Basically,
movie.
Yeah. Les Mis has turned out to be a good analogy. For this movie.
Well, it's they're two revolutionary tales.
Yeah,
and so there was a lot of parallels that I was like, oh, that that reminds me, like going all the way back sort of at the beginning where they're on the bridge and Raju grabs that flag. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's them at the barricade waving their flag. And so and then this Beam getting just absolutely mutilated. Yeah. And he's singing this song. I was like, this is "Do You Hear the People Sing?" Yeah. And it's like, it's a great moment, but it culminates in Raju being like, okay, like, I still want to like achieve my goal, but I saw this guy like inspire everyone with just a song. And so he decides like, all right, I'm going to break him free. And again, his plan is kind of funny. Like, I mean, it's really, again, there's a great moment where they set up something that like comes back later where you see him clipping all the like wicks on the guns. And so then it explains like why they don't all just shoot him right away, because he like plans for that. Yeah. But what I thought was kind of funny is that his plan is basically to like set up this trap to like free Beam, but then also like drop a tree on like the governor. Yeah. And it kind of works, but like there's a very cool moment where like the tree drops and the guy like comes out of the like car in slow motion and he like grabs his rifle. Yeah, that also just so happens to be flying out of the car where he needs it. Right where he needs it. Like he doesn't have to look to the side of him. Yeah. And he like shoots Raju's car.
but like it flips in a way that is so like not worthy of the shot that he took, and it like flips like 5 times. But basically, what it culminates in is Raju being captured, and we then follow Beam as he's like trying to evade being captured, and Beam ends up running into Sita, who is Raju's like long distant lover, basically. Like
they're to be married.
But or to be they're engaged or something. And there's this great moment where like Beam is hiding out in this whatever, and he doesn't know that Sita is Raju's lover. Like he just thinks she's whatever. And she tricks the British by telling them that like, oh no, you can't come in. Like there's smallpox in here. And he's like, thank you. And then there's like the discovery that she, is engaged to Raju, and she's reading this letter that is like, Raju confessing that like he had to sacrifice his best friend and he didn't know if it was the right thing to do. And there's this moment where I remember when I watched it the first time, I was like, it really kind of sealed in my brain that like, not only is this like a great action movie and it's like a great musical, like it's just a good movie.
Yeah.
And it like had a good visual language where she's like reading the letter, and then there's this gust of wind, and the like wind takes the letter and like hits Beam with it. And you see in his face, like he's so broken up or whatever. But I loved that like they had the thought of the symbolism of like, that him being captured is on Beam, right? Like it's his fault that he, like physically having the letter hit him like that. It's like it reinforces this idea that like you sacrificed your best friend too.
Yeah.
Like Raju's not the only one at fault here. Like, you let him get captured. Like, and there's that moment where he's like, I'm going to bring him home to you, you know? And it's like, it builds up to this great, whatever. But I thought like that the in a lesser movie, they would have just been like, whatever. But they never have a moment where they say that, I guess, is what I love so much about it. Like, they're not like, I feel so bad, I should go, whatever. Like, you see it in his face, and it's conveyed in the music and the action. Like, there's no moment where the movie treats you like you're dumb, I guess, which I really appreciate. Like,
it's not holding your hand.
Right. It understands that, like, oh, you get it. You know?
It assumes that the audience is smart.
Yeah.
Right.
And so then it leads up into what is the best and biggest action sequence.
I want to go back because there's a little bit of context that we need. During Beam's rescue, Raju, because Molly was there. Yeah. And there's this scene where Molly is running towards Beam, and Raju is running after Molly, and he sees there's a sniper in the bushes, and Raju notices it because that one, he's superhuman and awesome.
Of course.
And he notices this sniper, and the sniper's aiming at Beam, right? So he's like, I gotta save my friend. Yeah. So he pulls out a pistol, and it's just the best shot ever. Yeah. Because I'm like, how did you do that with a pistol?
Yeah, how do you see him?
And so he's aiming at the sniper, but it looks to Beam like he's aiming at Molly. Yeah. And he fires. And there's like this great, like, I think Molly like drops and Beam goes over, and the bullet goes right between the two and hits the sniper. And that's why Beam, I think, left him, because he was assuming that he was trying to hit Molly.
Right. And he hits him with a stick.
Yes. Yeah. He just clocks him with a stick. And then Raju is like fighting off like 4 British people to allow Beam to escape. And he's like holding onto him and watching Beam run away. And the instant that Beam like drops below the horizon, he relaxes and then just blacks out. And then he gets captured. And then we go to, Beam realizing, oh, he wasn't trying to shoot Molly. He was trying to save my life. Yeah. And so that's why he was like, I'm going to bring him back home to you.
Yeah. And there's also a great moment too, where like in between those, where the governor's like explaining like, oh, we still haven't caught Beam or whatever. It's been, 12 weeks or whatever, however long they say it is.
Months.
And they're like, we should go check on our prisoner. And they cut to Raju, and they're like, oh, he hasn't eaten in this many days. Like, he'll be on his knees begging. And they cut to him doing pull-ups. Like,
it was the Uncle Iroh.
Chain. Yeah.
It was the Uncle Iroh treatment.
And he's got, like, this crazy long hair and a long beard.
Yeah.
And his music kicks in, and he's like this like super villain.
Yeah.
But they put him in. Oh, the dog is dreaming. They put him in like solitary confinement, which is basically just like a hole
in the ground.
Yeah. And so when Beam comes to rescue him, he's like they're like knocking on the ground to like communicate to each other where they are, and his plan is. Well, okay, before that, there's a great moment where, like, they meet each other again for the first time, and Beam is, like, apologizing. And, again, it's this moment that you don't get a lot in, like, more masculine... I don't want to say more masculine. Like, there's, like this, like, toxic masculine idea that, like, men don't show, like... Emotions. And, like, there's this really touching moment where Beam is, like, crying, and he's like, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know. Like, I betrayed you and whatever. And Raju's just like, dude, it's cool. Like, we're fine. Like, I forgive you. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he, like, puts his hand on his face. And again, it's like, you don't expect that in, like, an action movie. Like, this, like, male affection. Like,
and vulnerability.
Vulnerability, yeah. And then Beam rips the gate off with his bare hands, which
it was like solid iron, like holding it down. And he just like strains and rips the fucking thing out of the ground, and it like clangs, and then all the British are like, huh?
Yeah.
And then begins the greatest.
It's so good. And like, so at first they're like, on the ground, like punching people, and then it like cuts away, and when it cuts back, like they're behind a wall or something. And Raju is on Beam's shoulders.
Yeah, because Raju had his legs beaten.
Right, that's right.
And he couldn't stand on his own.
Yeah.
And so he's just sitting on Beam's shoulders.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Which is, I mean, it refers to something, like, you see them doing that a couple of times. Like, Beam is, like, doing leg presses with, like, Raju on his shoulders and stuff. But, so then the rest of the sequence is them, like, running around and, like, punching people and, like, hitting them. And then, like, somehow, I don't know how it happens. I can't remember, but they obtain 2 rifles.
Oh, yeah.
And so Raju has a rifle in each hand.
Yep.
And when he needs to reload, he just lowers them, and Beam reloads the guns.
Yep.
And it's like, again, it's so dumb, but it's so good. Like, you buy it 100%. And, like... Raju is like shooting behind him and like
to the side,
and then like when he runs out of ammo, he just like throws them at people and like, and so then they like get away into the forest, and the governor's like send in like the special forces, like whatever, and you see like Raju and Beam like Beam like does some like forest wizardry to like get Raju back to like fighting shape.
Yeah.
And then like you see all these like British soldiers, and they think Beam is like, accounted for because he's like getting water from a spring or something. And then he like jumps in the water, and like all of a sudden like all these like flaming arrows are like coming out, and like you see Raju, and he's all of a sudden got this like bow and arrow that he obtained from this like shrine, which I assume I didn't look into it really. I think that's some sort of religious, like Hindu religious figure that I don't really understand the context of. But regardless, like he's like shooting dudes like through their glasses, and like I think the moment that like when I first told you about this movie, I was like, there's a moment where a guy shoots an arrow into a tree, and it misses his head, and so he runs and kicks the tree and puts the arrow in his head. And
oh my God, I was hysterical.
It's so happened. Good. It's like, it's just like it just works.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and we see that fire and water aspect again because Beam jumps in the pond,
right?
And Raju, he's shooting his flaming arrows, and there's a moment where Raju, I think, kicks like a couple of British soldiers into the water, and Beam comes up and like grabs them and drowns them in the water. And then he's like under the water for a little bit, and then he like emerges spectacularly, and it's just like kicking ass.
Yeah.
And then there's the moment where he picks up and throws a motorcycle. That I was mouth agape.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going
It's
on?
wonderful.
It was awesome.
It's so good. Well, and like, so they figure out like, okay, we've killed all these dudes. Yeah. Right. But like the governor is still there in his fucking thing.
Yeah.
And there's a great line, and I remembered specifically. He says like, let's stop messing around with these jackals. Let's go get the lion. Yeah. And I'm like, or let's go hunt a lion or something like that.
Yes.
And I was like, hell yeah. And so they do a thing that they've done a few times where Beam is on a motorcycle and Raju's on a horse, and they like run at the palace, and they go up like this ramp. I don't know where it came from, but they go up. Oh, I think it's a tree trunk.
Something like that.
And then Raju, like you said, like throws the motorcycle, and like everything explodes.
Yeah.
And
well, they launch the motorcycle, and it looks like it's gonna hit the governor, but it goes through a window.
Yes.
And Raju fired a flaming arrow on the gas tank of the motorcycle, and you see it like, you're like, oh, it's gonna hit the governor, but it drops too low, goes through a window, and it then does a close-up shot of just a bunch of boxes of TNT.
Yeah.
And they just start exploding. And like it was like the whole second floor of this building. Yeah. Just chocked full of TNT.
Yeah, for some reason.
Obviously, right? And so it's just like this chain reaction of all of these like TNT and grenades just exploding spectacularly. You see like one British guy, he's like outrunning it a little bit, and you're like, oh, he might make it. And then all of a sudden he just like gets blown asunder and like does like 1,000 flips. Yeah. And then the whole I thought this was the funniest. The whole roof, it was like a dome of this building, like lifted up a little bit and then just fell. I was like,
so good.
It was so dumb. And I loved it.
And then like, so the governor like somehow survives. Yeah. And there's a great moment where like he thinks he's like bleeding. Yeah. But then he looks up and his wife has been like impaled and like is in like this barbed wire, which like they establish very early that like she's awful. So like you don't feel that bad like seeing her like that. You're kind of like, yeah, fuck yeah. And then he like is like ready to keep fighting, and then he gets like shot by an arrow. Yeah. And Raju is like gives him back the same speech about like what a bullet is worth.
Well, and because the governor was loading his gun. Right. And when he got shot by the arrow, the bullet in his hand flew, and Raju caught it and handed it to Beam. Yeah. Right, obviously. Right? And then, he gave that speech about the bullet.
And then he shoots him.
Yeah, and then he shoots him. And he was like, give it back to him and, put it in his heart or whatever. Yeah. And it doesn't, like, embed itself in his heart. It just goes straight through his chest and out the other end.
Yeah, of course.
Right, obviously. And it was,
And then there's the final song. Yeah. Which is also great. I mean, it's like, it's more, I suppose the other two, like, it kind of takes place, like, outside the world of the movie. Like, it's more, like, on this giant set. Yeah. And it's, like, it's not my favorite of the songs. Like, I think it kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit. Yeah. But it's a good way to, like, bookend it. Yeah. And you see these, like, different, like, images of, like, different Indian, like, revolutionary figures. And you see like Raju go back to like his village, and you see Beam return to his, and it's just like a nice ending, but it just kind of carries on again, that feeling of like this like epic scope and that like, just sincerity and like everything. But that final action sequence is, it's just so wonderful. Like, the first time I watched it, I thought like, oh, it's going to be kind of like cheesy or I don't even know, but it's just like whatever you think this movie is gonna be, like, it just defies you. Like, it's so good.
We've probably undersold it.
I don't think you can oversell it. Like,
yeah.
No matter, because I think I sold it to you as like it's a 3-hour long like Indian action movie.
Yeah.
And like, you just can't. I don't even know.
You can't put it into words like we've done our best, I think, to describe like the action and all that stuff, but you have to just witness it because it is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Right. Just how crazy those sequences are, and like the story is just so well thought out.
Yeah.
Like there was never a moment where I was like, hold on, I missed something, or that's like a plot hole or whatever. Like everything was, and it was, and we touched on this a little bit, there's just like those little tiny details that, you know, normally you wouldn't think of or you just kind of gloss over, but those tiny details would come back, right? Like their training montage, right? You know, Raju doing pull-ups.
Right.
We see then again in the in the prison, and when they're doing that sequence where he's on his shoulders, right? He's the arms of this. Right. He's got that strong upper body. And, you know, Beam doing the squats, he's the legs of this operation. Yes. And so...
Man, you picked up on so much stuff.
Yeah, well, it's... Part of it is being a theater person and being forced to look for those little tiny things.
Yeah.
And looking for, you know, the parallels, because, like, you know, look at Shakespeare, look at any of these like big musicals. There's, especially in musicals, you get these musical themes that reoccur over and over again because you have like reprises, or you have the same song but in a minor key, and so it like reflects even in like Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
When you watch like the later seasons of the Clone Wars animated series, as Anakin is moving farther and farther to the dark side, we get hints of Darth Vader's theme, right? Not a lot, and it's not even like the exact notes. It's the same like rhythm, and in a different key, but you know, right? You're like Anakin will do something that is sort of not the Jedi way, and then that'll play, and you're like, okay, right? And so picking up on all that stuff was drilled into my skull for 4 years. But yeah, it was just...
It's wonderful. So I don't know if we'll establish like a rating system for the show or not, we haven't really talked about it, but like
we're doing our best.
Yeah. Okay, let's say, I don't know, do you want to do a star rating? Do you want to do a thumbs up? Do you want to do a...
We'll do... I like
4 out of 5 kicks.
I'll do out of 10. I like doing out of 10s.
10's better. Yeah.
And
there's more nuance.
Yeah, and you know, you can do like decimals.
Yeah.
Right, and get specific percentages.
That's true. So what would you give it out of 10?
Oh man. I mean, honestly, like 9.9 to 10.
Oh,
like it, like
I get you.
It was so I have a hard time thinking of like any moment where I wasn't entertained.
Yeah.
And like I had said at the very beginning of this episode, like when I go into a movie, I am there to enjoy it, right? I'm not there to like think critically about it. I'm not like trying to nitpick stuff.
Right.
I just am there to enjoy stuff and enjoy it. And that's why, like, you know, when I look at like Rotten Tomatoes, I don't look at the critics. If the critics say it's bad, it's probably going to be a good movie. If the critics say it's good, it's probably not going to be that great.
Sure.
Now, there's, you know, it's not that black and white.
Right.
But, you know, with this movie, I didn't look at any critics. The only recommendation I had was from you.
Yeah.
And I've known you long enough that I was like, okay, I'll probably like this.
Right.
Because I know how you function. I mean, for God's sake, you like the Fast and Furious movies, and you'll defend them until the day you die.
Till the day I die.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, this is probably going to be a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm having just such a hard time finding a part where I just wasn't having fun and I wasn't enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Because every moment, like even the romance, like I would argue that this is also just like a full on like romance movie.
Yeah.
Right? Because like towards the end we see Beam and Jenny sort of, I don't know if it's implied that they get together, but there's clear feelings there.
Yeah.
Between them, and it is very likely that they do end up together. And then obviously Raju ends up with Sita, and just like the way those relationships were forged was just so well executed.
Yeah.
And so 9.9 to 10 honestly is where I'm sitting.
Sorry, I was recording because I feel like we should like, or I'm gonna like record all of our like scores so we can like look back on them.
Yeah.
But I think for me, out of 10, I would give it like a teeny tiny bit lower at 9 out of 10. And the only reason I say that is because like I think the only criticism I have, and it's like such a tiny thing, is just that like that final song I think goes too long, and it's only like it's a good song, but it's like by the end of it I was really like, all right, like looking at my watch, like kind of like oh, I just want to like go do whatever I have to do.
Yeah,
and it's a good song, but like I feel like if you could take that part out.
Or cut it down.
It down, because it is like a 4 or 5 minute song, or it felt like it.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of insane to take a whole point for that, but
that's fine. It's your
rating,
so.
It's just how I feel, man. I don't know.
You're valid.
But all right, well, that's the show, I guess.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever done a podcast. Very fun.
It was fun.
I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to watch more just awesome movies.
Cool.
Because I don't watch a lot of movies. I like if somebody's like, hey, you want to go to movie theaters? I'm like, yeah, sure. But I don't like go out of my way.
Yeah.
Obviously, like with John Wick 4 coming up, I'm going to be there and present for that.
Well, and I think so around March, I think because I have a little bit of a plan in terms of like episodes, and I want to try and announce them like a week before we put them out.
Okay.
That way people have time to like watch the movie and kind of keep up with it, almost like a book club. But John Wick, what I want to do is like, because it kind of comes out at the tail end of March, I want to do like a Keanu month. So like the 2 episodes we do that month, I want to do one of his like lesser known movies. So I'm thinking either like Constantine.
I was just thinking
or something like that. And then in the lead up to John Wick, what I want to do is Man of Tai Chi, which is the movie that he directed.
Oh, okay.
It's like a martial arts movie. It was filmed in Taiwan, I want to say. It's really good. Okay. But I feel like no one has seen it. Like I feel like I'm the only man alive who's seen that movie.
Yeah.
And so I want to watch that because it's a rare villain role for Keanu. And he directed it, but it's like, it's just good. We'll just have to watch it. So that's kind of my plan.
Cool.
Next week, I'm thinking we'll do Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter.
Okay.
Because I don't think I said, but like what I kind of want to do is like, because the show's gonna be bi-weekly, so we'll do one every other week, like 2 a month. But each 2 episodes will be like a thematic block. So like RRR and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I guess the theme is like historical figures gone wild. I don't know.
Yeah. NSFW.
And then maybe for December, I'm thinking like holiday season. So I have a couple ideas for that. And then January, I don't know. February, I don't know.
Okay. We got time.
February we could do like love-based action movies, like romance things. Yeah. We could return to some sort of Indian or Bollywood film. But anyway, so welcome to this as of yet unnamed podcast.
We're figuring it out as we go.
This has been episode 1, I guess.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
Bye.
See ya.